Hi, everybody. I'm Kathy Kiley. I'm the Lee Hills Chair in Free Press Studies here at the University of Missouri School of Journalism. And I am back for day 3 of Friends of the Facts. And for those of you who have joined some of our earlier sessions, this is going to look a little different. Our TV studio is occupied for another event right now. And so we are doing a Zoom session from my office and from Washington, D.C., where our guests are going to be joining us. So you will be able to interact as you would in any Zoom session. We've got a chat function. You can put questions in there, or if you're less shy, you can just unmute yourself and ask some questions in the session itself. I will be interjecting now and then to moderate, but mostly this is the show for our friends from IREX, Matt Vanderwerff and Tara Susman-Peña. And they are longtime friends and partners. Some of you may have heard our friends from the Daniel Boone Regional Library yesterday. They worked with IREX on a news literacy program that they have implemented here in mid-Missouri. And so I'm really glad to see both Tara and Matt from Washington, D.C. And before they start, they have a really good program. I want them to maybe talk a little bit about what IREX is for those who don't know. And I will also remind everybody before I turn it over that Friends of the Facts is being hosted by the Missouri School or the University of Missouri Conference Center, and our conference hub houses all of our videos, current and past. So if we refer to anything like the Daniel Boone Regional Library video, you can access that on demand through the conference hub. So with that, thank you so much, Tara and Matt, for being here today and for sharing what I know is going to be a really great program. So if you just will maybe say a few words about yourselves and your background and IREX. Thank you.
Thanks, Kathy. Yes, we will get into IREX and ourselves in just a moment, but wanted to re-emphasize what Kathy just said. Now, this is a slightly different format, and we have designed this for you all to participate. So please participate. A lot of it will be able to be done in the chat, so if you don't feel like coming on camera or coming off mute, that's totally fine. But this is, originally, of course, this Friends of the Facts was meant to be in person. We would have all been in a room together and doing a workshop. So this is meant to be in some way recreating that. So please, we hope to get your interaction. So to kick us off, we have hopefully a pretty easy poll that we'd love you to put your response in the chat. The news affects my mood. Can you put in a number? Do you agree? Partly agree, disagree, or partly disagree? Sorry, I went backwards. 1, 2, 3, or 4. Ooh, we got a lot of ones. So a lot of people say that the news does affect their mood. Yes, I think I would. Tamar, hello, Tamar. So shout out to Tamar Wellner, who was a key person in designing our original curriculum for the US. Excellent.
And she's a graduate of the University of Missouri.
I graduated from the University of Missouri. Sorry, missed that critical element there. And welcome to everyone, of course. Okay, so I think for at least all of us who have responded, the news affects our mood. Yes, this is very related to what we're going to talk about today. Can you go to the next? Matt, please. Maybe, maybe not.
This is your big test, Matt. How many news literacy experts does it take? Yay! To move the slide. Yeah, I think we all can sympathize. We've all had those problems.
Yeah. So this is how to cultivate digital wellness. We are from IREX, which is an international global development organization based in Washington, D.C. that's been around for more than 50 years. And I'll just read our mission. It makes it a little easier. Our mission is to build more just, prosperous, inclusive world by empowering youth, cultivating leaders, strengthening institutions, and extending access to quality education and information. And increasingly, we've been doing more and more of this type of work which we could call media literacy, but it's becoming sort of broader and broader as we're now including digital wellness. As well, I'm Tara Susman-Peña, and I've been working on these programs now for about 5 years, and I spend a lot of time adapting and thinking about how to do our media literacy in a variety of contexts, in addition to also facilitating trainings. Matt, you want to introduce yourself?
I would love to. My name is Matt Vanderwerff. I'm really delighted to be here today. I've been with IREX for a bit over 10 years, working on programs that focus on improving the quality of independent media, as well as access to information around the world. And I've also been working on our programs that focus on media literacy and really helping to give people the skills to deal with manipulative information, which is sort of the waters that we all swim in today. And I'm really excited to be with Tara today. I do a lot of work training and helping to design curriculum, and looking forward to getting to know you and also hearing some feedback about what we share today as well.
And I will say, as you get ready for this, this is a really, this could not be better timing, I think, in terms of our program. We had a session earlier this morning with Scott Christensen, who is one of our professors here at the University of Missouri, who is a real tech geek and understands a lot about technology. He talked about deep fakes, and our interviewer, Taylor Freeman, who is a recent graduate of the University of Missouri and a journalism school graduate, was really saying, how do we possibly navigate this? How do we interact with this new media ecosystem without becoming just despairing over the possibility for getting tricked? So I think the idea of proactive steps we can take to build our wellness is fantastic. So it's really exciting that you're here.
Great. Well, before we dive in, Tara and I work for IREX, and I think we have an obligation to just share, at least briefly, a little bit about where this work comes from, and provide that context as well. So the programs that we work on that are focused on countering misinformation, but really sort of a broad host of skills to deal with manipulative information, come out of a program that our organization developed in Ukraine almost 10 years ago in 2014, called Learn to Discern. And I'm not going to go into all the details around that program, but I do just want to note that the program was developed to equip people with the sort of skills that we saw were becoming more and more important with the type of manipulative information that citizens in Ukraine were experiencing at that point in time. And today, that initial program has expanded to about 20 countries, and we're working around the world. If you'd like more information about our work and to learn more about that, feel free to reach out to us after the session, and we'd be happy to talk more.
Awesome, thanks. So, and just a quick note that somehow the D fell off of L2D. We abbreviate Learn to Discern as L2D, and that's the name of our program. Okay, so we wanted to actually, so the interaction continues. We wanted to actually ask you all what you think digital wellness is. I'm not sure that there's like one definition, and we're really still building up this component of our work. So could you drop in the chat when you think about digital wellness, what comes to mind? And really anything is fine. We're not looking for one answer. We're just looking for people's perspective and your reflections. Regina says discernment. Okay, so yeah, so discernment is definitely a part of digital wellness. The question, if anyone was at the session yesterday with the Daniel Boone Public Librarians, there was a question raised from the audience about burnout, which is a really important, I think, for all of us to be thinking who are in this digital age. And so I think digital wellness is a good way to think about how to prevent burnout, how to deal with burnout. Michaela, if I'm pronouncing your name right, says digital wellness makes me think about how we use and consume media. Kathy says avoiding addiction. Yes, which can be very difficult because these digital apparatuses are designed for addiction. Lisa says being able to discern the truth and interact with the news with some level of equanimity. I like that a lot. So it's both about the skills, but also maintaining kind of some level of emotion. Kelsey says healthy relationship with technology. Awesome. Tamara, resilience to mental and physical harms from online activities. Absolutely. So some of it is just overuse and burnout and too much and addiction. And some of it is actually, of course, there are digital attacks. There's hate speech. There's all kinds of things. There's more great things coming in. Keep them coming. I'm actually going to move on to the next slide. Here we go. So this is one way of thinking about it, right? Elements of digital wellness that we've been thinking about. All these things together, right? So physical health, mental and emotional, values and purpose in life, right? Because a big piece of this is time. And if it's sucking up all our time, what does that say about our values and our purpose? Relationships, right? I think so many of us in the last couple of years have spent much more time online and relating to people online, exacerbated by the pandemic. And that, of course, has affected our relationships, which affects us as a whole person, right? Learning and productivity, right? There's also impacts in terms of how do we learn? How do we do better? Digital engagement can both help and also prevent that. And then safety and security, which speaks a little bit to this idea of online harms, but in addition to vulnerabilities around our information and our data. So we really are thinking about it, about all these things together, and just the importance of remembering that, we are whole people, right? We have multifacets, and anytime we're engaging online, we're likely to be impacted in all of these different ways. Okay, let's move to the next.
All right, so that's digital wellness, or at least one definition of digital wellness. And now I want to talk a little bit about why we thought this was important to share today, and why it's something that we've been thinking about. And something that Tara and I, as well as our colleagues, have been reflecting on is that sometimes when we talk about digital well-being, there's a certain sense that that it's a concept that's like nice to have, or sort of an extra, but that the real problem, the sort of real capital REAL problem is misinformation or disinformation, sort of big capital letters. And today what we'd like to confront is that idea. And we'd like to suggest that in important ways, when it comes to misinformation, when it comes to news literacy, etc., that the tip of the iceberg, that those things are kind of the tip of the iceberg. They're sort of what we're seeing as manifestations of some deeper problems. And underneath that sort of tip of the iceberg are some really troubling dynamics about our own relationships with our digital devices and our news feeds as well. And we want to suggest that understanding and reflecting on why we all struggle to have healthy relationships with the news and with our devices is not just an extra thing, but it's foundational. It's sort of critical so that we can think about what effective news literacy might look like today. And so we hope that you'll be open to hearing this. And again, we'd love your feedback on these concepts as well.
Okay, so we just showed you 6 different concepts. We don't have time to talk about all of them, but we are going to give you some practical tips on a few of them. So we're going to start with the area of physical health. You could change to the next, please. All right, another quick poll. My habits with digital devices affect my sleep. Put your answer in the chat, please. 1, agree. 2, partly agree. 3 partly disagree, 4 disagree. Okay, so we have more of a range for this one. We have some 1s, we have some 3s, we got a couple 2s. Okay, so all over the place. Great. Someone says 4. That's awesome. So in the event, I'm going to guess that some of the people that put in 3 and 4 may have some sort of tips of their own, and we will have some time toward the end to share some of those resources and tips too, with those of us that may need it. Okay, so we're going to get on to some of our practical tips. So the practical tip number 1 is move your body. So let's do, put a thumbs up in the chat if you find yourself sitting at your computer for more than 2 hours a day without a break. So thumbs up in the chat if you find yourself, or you can, yeah, not make it too complicated. So it would be like, let me see if I can actually, someone's beat me to it. Yeah. Yeah, I do for sure. Okay, Matt says yes. Michaela says yes. So, and perhaps some of us even spend more than 2 hours in front of the computer without a break, 3 hours, 4 hours. Henry says no. Good for you, Henry. Okay, so we have some yeses, 1 no. Work days, yeah, exactly. Michaela says between 2 to 4 hours without a real break. Ooh, I unfortunately can completely empathize with that feeling. And sometimes the time just goes by, and all of a sudden we think, "Oh my goodness, where did the time go?" Right? So, so we want to encourage you to make some opportunities to give your body a break. Right? We all know that being in front of a computer for too long can impact our eyes. From staring at the screen, it can impact our back. Here I am hunched over, illustrating probably the way we should not be sitting. Your wrists, if you're typing a lot. So there's some things you can do, right? You can take a break. You can have a buddy that might help, where you are going to text each other to make sure that you've gotten up and taken a walk around, gotten a drink of water. You can set an alarm on your phone that says, get up and stretch. You may have to build these kinds of things into your day to avoid things like carpal tunnel syndrome, tech neck, or other kinds of pain and just exhaustion, right? And there are also some really simple stretches that I'm going to do now that can help, that can help sort of release some of the stress from your body, and they feel really good. And these were designed by a colleague who is a yoga teacher, but they're really super simple, and I think probably most people can do them. So I will invite you to do them along with me. You don't have to turn on your camera, but I invite you to give them a try. So I'm going to back up so maybe you can see a little bit more of me, hopefully. So the first one is neck rolls, and so be aware of your breathing. You're going to be breathing continually throughout these exercises. You want to tilt your head to one side, roll it down. If you feel any areas that feel like they need more stretch, you can kind of stop there and just feel the stretch and roll around to the other side and then roll back again. If it's okay for your neck, you can also go to the back and go all the way around. And try the other side. Try and keep your body even as you're doing this. So we'll just take a few minutes to go back and forth to both sides. And after, let's say, I've lost track, but after doing 4 rolls to each side, you can come back to the center, kind of recenter and remember your straight spine up in your seat. Okay, let's go on to the next. Okay, so the next one is shoulder rolls. So for this one, you're gonna touch your, what are these things? You're gonna touch your shoulders, and you're gonna roll your elbows forward, up, back, and again, forward, up and back. Let's do 5 of these going forward. You can go as slow as you want, or if it feels good, you can go faster. And then once you've hit the 4 times or 5 times, I can't remember what I said, go back around in the other direction. You find any places where it feels like you're kind of sticking a little, you might want to stretch that out, keeping your spine straight. Okay, that's that second exercise. Let's go to the next. Okay, this is a really nice one, and it's good for your back. So you can grab onto one side of your chair if you want, raise your arm up in the air, take an inhale, and on the exhale, stretch over to the side and just feel the stretch all the way up the side of your body. Keep your feet really firmly in the ground. Try and keep your weight even on both feet. And stretch to the other side, up, inhale, exhale over to the side. Keep your breath moving as you're going. Try and feel your spine stretching straight out through your head. If your arms are more flexible than mine, then your hand might be a little closer to your ear. And take another one on each side. And obviously, when you do these on your own, you can, if you like something more, you can do it more. I like this one. My waist feels like it doesn't move very much during the day. Okay, let's go to the next. Okay, if anyone has tried a yoga class before, you might recognize the cat-cow exercise, which is always done with the breath. So on an inhale, you're gonna, if you can reach your knees, you're gonna touch your knees, weight even on both feet. You're gonna inhale and arch your back and look up toward the ceiling. And then on the exhale, you're gonna round your back and look down toward your navel. Try a couple more of those. Inhale, looking up. Exhale, looking down. Inhale. Exhale. Okay, let's move to the next. Matt says this one is not your favorite. Sometimes the ones that are not our favorites are the ones that we need to do. This next one is a seated spinal twist. Twists are really awesome for your digestion, for all the nerves along your spine. So for this one, you might want to grab onto the back of the chair. If you have a back you can grab onto, and then straighten up your spine, breathe in. And as you breathe out, twist around, trying to keep your feet even on the ground. Look toward the back. Breathing. Come back slowly. And again, breathe in and breathe out. Twist to the other side. Keep breathing. Let's do one more to each side. I have a nice little notch here on my chair, just coincidentally, which is a nice place to hold while I'm twisting. And last side. I love that one. I'm a big fan of twists. And the last one. So this is one where if you're able to cross your legs, you can do that, or you can keep them uncrossed. I'm going to disappear in a moment, but you're going to bend forward and touch your toes so you can breathe in while you're up and breathe out while you go down. Keep your breath moving. I had to move around the desk here and come back up, switch the cross of your legs. Breathe in and breathe out. Relax over your legs. And that one should help to release your lower back as well. Okay, so let's move to the next slide, please. Okay, so those are the exercises that we have to offer. Super simple. You can take whichever ones you want, do them a couple of times each day, do more if you want. And I'd love to hear, like, how do you feel after doing those exercises? Anyone feel a difference? I guess is the main question. I'd say my spine feels just like I'm able to be straighter. Like a certain lightness that feels really nice. Thanks, Lisa. Much better. Henry says, releases tension and stress. Excellent. Yeah, feels so much better after stretches. I know, it's amazing that I think most of us do, and yet we don't remember to do them always. So that's why we just love to offer that this could be a part of really honestly every day if you want. And Kathy says, by taking your mind and eyes off your screen, it can alter your mood. Absolutely. Right. And when you're thinking really only about your movements and your body and you're not thinking about the work, sometimes that actually can have a really excellent impact on the work itself, right? When you move your mind away and allow it to settle on something else, then you can come back more refreshed. So thanks, everyone. I appreciate your willingness to engage in this. And hopefully that you found something that will be useful for you. Let's move to the next slide.
Thanks, Tara. So we have talked about the first tip, which is about sort of physical exercise and moving our bodies. And so the second area of tips we want to talk about today is emotional and mental health. And again, we have a very short amount of time, so we're not going to dig into this very deeply, but we want to talk about some tips related to our own mental and emotional health and how that can help us in our digital wellness. So we have a very simple approach to helping train ourselves and others to regulate our emotions in response to, in particular, manipulative information. And we're going to share that approach, which we call Name It to Tame It, here in a minute. I think Kathy even mentioned it in the opening session as well. But the reason that we think this is so important is that the use of emotionally charged narratives, language and images often is a signal of an attempt to manipulate. Engagement is often built around the most emotionally engaging material, which makes us angry or feel rage or elation, right? Sort of a strong sense of agreement or anger. And strong emotions are often a really key component in online content going viral. So we want to practice a very simple technique that I find is useful, and also we think has a really profound impact when integrated into other news literacy initiatives as well. So we call this approach Name It to Tame It. The idea is to name an emotion that you feel in response to being exposed to a piece of media content. And I want to note here that the original idea comes from Dr. Dan Siegel. He is an expert in executive function. He's also a researcher who focuses on, he's a researcher as well as a practicing clinical psychologist. He's done a lot of work in this area, and we have contacted him, reached out to him about how we use this approach. So he's familiar with what it is that we're doing, but I just wanted to provide credit for that. And Name It to Tame It basically has three components. The first is to pause or stop and to disengage from a piece of media content. The second is to ask yourself how you're feeling in reaction to that piece of content. Or sometimes I ask myself, what did the creators of that content want me to feel? And then finally, you want to voice or say the name of the emotion as a way to regain control of your brain and regain the sort of ability to decipher how you might respond to that piece of content as well. So those are the 3 steps in this process. And it's something that you can integrate in a lot of different areas of your life, whether it's just scrolling through a news feed, watching cable news, hearing about a big decision that's been made politically, all sorts of ways that we can use this to regulate our emotions. Before I jump into the exercise, I just want to note that we often show this wheel of emotions as a way to sort of provide the language that people can use in thinking about what emotional reaction they're seeing. When we're working with younger students, we might use something more like this, which is an emoji chart. My own kids, my younger kids are in elementary school, and I've noticed that some teachers are bringing posters like this into the classroom. You know, a very easy way to help students and others sort of think about what it is that they're feeling in response to seeing a piece of media content. So I want to provide just a quick example for myself of how name it to tame it might work. And then we'll use a few examples, and I'll ask everyone to do this process themselves as well. So now's my opportunity to feel a little self-conscious while you all watch me practice this. Be gracious with me. All right, so I am looking at this picture. This picture is from a news article, and it is a photo of a bicycle laid down on the ground. It looks like it might be damaged in some way. There's lights on. It looks like it might be at nighttime. So I'm going to look at that. I'm going to stop and turn away from the screen. And I'm going to ask myself how that makes me feel. And this makes me feel scared in some ways. And some of the reasons that makes me feel scared is that I ride a bicycle. I often ride a bicycle with one of my kids on the back to get to school or daycare. In some ways, I'm thinking about how someone might have been hurt here, and I'm primed to sort of feel scared or worried as a result of seeing this image. So that's an example of how the name it to tame it process might work. So now I'm going to ask all of you to be similarly vulnerable and to practice this along with us. So I'm going to show another image on the screen, and I'm going to ask you to take it in and then stop, turn away, ask yourself how you feel, and then if you feel comfortable, to share that emotion in the chat. So here's the image that I want you to take in. And then when you're ready, go ahead and stop, turn away from the screen. And actually say to yourself or write down what emotion you're feeling. So I see a few answers: joyful, calm, serenity, happy, relaxed, a twinge of envy. Thank you for being honest, Lisa. Yeah, I think that's one I'd feel too. Life, Henry. Serene, but fear of missing out. Why am I not there? That's great, Kathy. Yeah, I think this is a good one. And I do want to stop and say that that we pretty intentionally, when we introduce this exercise, do not use like clearly partisan images, especially not initially. We're trying to develop this practice and not like sort of hit people over the head with a shocked feeling that starts conversations about the content. We want to build this as a practice. So let's move on to another example, and I want to ask you to do the same thing. So a very different sort of image. And I think depending on where you are, what your experiences are, you might have different reactions to this one. So go ahead and take it in and then stop, turn away, and identify what emotion you might feel in response to this. And then go ahead and verbalize it. Fear, worry, alarmed, anxious, and scared. Kathy, who did this? Yeah. Our folks who might be out west might have a different sort of emotional reaction to this. Worry, You can imagine that that images, people have different emotional responses to images based on their life experiences, what they sort of bring to viewing that image as well. Worry, thank you. Yeah, sad and scared. All right, and now I think we've got one more here. So now now that we've had two that are kind of like very non-political, I want to share one that's a little more current event related. So again, go ahead and take this image in and then stop, turn your head away and ask yourself how this makes you feel. And then when you're ready, go ahead and verbalize that emotion. And if you feel comfortable, go ahead and share it in the chat. This is great. We've got some different responses coming in. And I really appreciate everyone being vulnerable and also being honest about how this makes you feel. Yeah, and I imagine, this is a photo of a school board meeting in recent months. Depending on where you are, if you're in part of the education system, you may have a different reaction to this. If you're maybe more distant from the education system, you may feel something different about it. But I think those emotions are really important to untangle because it may allow you to then be in a position to process the information related to the image that you're seeing. So I want to quickly pause, and before we jump into the next tip, I want to just ask if anybody has any reflections on this exercise, how you experienced it, if you have any thoughts about how it might work, what it might look like to integrate this into news literacy programs or initiatives, or any other feedback you'd like to share. Feel free to, we have enough time. I might invite folks to come off mute if you have something to share, but also feel free to do so in the chat as well.
I'd be curious to know if anyone in our audience has had an experience talking to, either trying to teach some of these concepts, news literacy, or just not teaching in a formal way, but maybe talking to a friend, a relative, and what the response has been. Because I do think that the approach Matt suggested here is really helpful. I find at Mizzou, and our librarians told us, which I thought was very interesting, the phrase that resonated with me, facts seem to be a trigger word. So sometimes even the language of news literacy can be viewed through a political lens. And so I just wonder if any of you have had that experience or have had some success in getting past that.
Hi, can you hear me?
We can hear you, Lisa.
Yeah, so not exactly that, but more of a question for you all. I'm at St. Louis Public Library, so I'm a public librarian, and we get people who walk up to the desk or call, and they ask us questions. And sometimes the questions have underlying like misunderstanding of facts. And I guess the question I often ask myself, and I answer it differently all the time because I'm human and circumstances change, but to what extent is it on me to like just kind of answer the question as asked, or to try to dig in and help them, redirect them to a better understanding? And I guess, one of the things that kind of helps me determine, along with, how many other things are on my desk to deal with, is to be honest. So I think it's like the gravity of it. Like, is this something that matters or is this something that doesn't matter? Should I just let it go? I worry sometimes whether is this something that matters to me? So I'd appreciate your thoughts.
What a big question. And I think anybody who's been on social media probably maybe shares something similar to that thought about, like, should I respond or not? And I don't want to pretend to know all the details or to suggest that I have an answer for all these situations. I think it's a really complicated question. I guess, and I don't want to provide like an answer, but a reflection that I might have related to this activity is just, I wonder if a way to engage people might be to model this sort of activity or prompts like this to get into those sort of more foundational questions about why they may be responding in a particular way to either a question that they have or something that they're looking at. So modeling it might look as simple as saying, like, wow, you asked this question, and I imagine that you might be really concerned about X, Y, or Z. I wonder if you can tell me more about that, or what you've been seeing, or why that's concerning to you. And I think maybe even getting that level of reflection before getting into like a fact-checking episode might help to put everyone in a stronger cognitive space to have those conversations about fact-checking. Tara, it looked like you were about to say something, so I want to also make sure you have space.
No, I think I had a very similar thought, and I think you said it actually probably better than I could have. I had a similar thought, which was just about, and I'm thinking a lot about Philippa Hughes's session from Monday as well. It's like, are there ways to model reflection, to encourage people to do reflection? And then the other thing is, like, find ways, small ways to connect, right? Which is sort of what Philippa's work is about. And whether it's through, deeply listening, which I think you just modeled now, Matt, and through curiosity. There's sort of all these basic human connection skills of ours that I think are being really challenged in this age. And we need to, all of us need to really strengthen those skills, I think, before we can get to the sort of, this debates about facts and fact checking. So I mean, yeah, I completely agree.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is Kathy, and we are in a similar situation as journalists. We kind of, our job is, I certainly don't see my job as to debate the sources that I have, but I also think that it's incumbent to not let falsehoods just sit out there. So maybe one way to do it is, if somebody came into the library and said, I want to know what I can do about all these lies that the skunks are telling. And you might say something like, it's not my understanding that skunks can talk. So where did you learn that? I have never heard that before. And maybe try to have a conversation about the underlying assumptions before you get to contradicting. I mean, does that make sense, IREX friends?
I mean, I think so. I like where we come from with this is that when we started doing this work, we found that there was that a lot of those in the media literacy, news literacy communities were really focused on like getting to critical thinking first or fact checking first. And there's a whole series of brain science that really tells you that that a person's not going to be in a position to carry out those like higher order cognitive tasks if they're in a state of rage or feeling like really emotionally trapped. Yeah, it's fight or flight. And so these are ways to like lower the, sort of lower the temperature in the room, so to speak, but it's not just for other people. And I want to emphasize that here. It's for all of us as well. It's not like something that other people need to do. It's something that I need to do. It's something that all of us, a skill that all of us need to learn. And this sort of like emotional regulation technique, I think we think it's one way to sort of like open that little space for more healthy dialogue. Yeah. Thank you for your question. I really appreciate it. I'd love to talk more, and hear more about the work that you're doing.
Also, Tara and Matt, could you take a look in the chat? Michaela and Henry have made some interesting comments that I think I'd love to hear you address about sort of the fatigue involved and the despair, I think. And we talked about this in one of our sessions yesterday, where I forget which speaker it was, said that sometimes one of our librarians said, you feel like you're going into a fight with a squirt gun. And I think that's what Michaela and Henry are capturing there, that sense of despair. So
thank you, Kathy. So yeah, I see Michaela, this is great. I like it. Encourages people to take a moment to reflect on their feelings, encourage them to be more conscious.
No, but a little further down, Henry says that he is seeing so much hopelessness among friends and students and colleagues. And Michaela says she agrees, especially given the political climate. So this sense of despair.
Yeah, I think that's true. And I think it's sometimes, like I've noted for myself, it's hard to know where that despair might come from. If you're not sort of reflecting on how doom scrolling, for example, might make you feel. Like it's easy to feel like that's a professional responsibility or like human responsibility that I have to witness things that are happening in the world. And I like this activity and versions of it, because I don't think this is the only way that it works, because it helps me to be more aware of how those things outside in the world are impacting me. Tara, anything you would want to add?
I mean, I think it just kind of reinforces the need to really build up our kind of wellness, and not just digital wellness, but also the sort of social connection as you said at the beginning, Matt, not a nice to have, but absolutely kind of critical for all of us.
And then Michaela notes she doom scrolled way too much, so she'd gone to just checking messages, staying away from news, because it just caused horrible mental health. Yeah, and actually, Michaela, this is an excellent segue into the third tip area that we have. And so if it's okay, I can like sort of use that as a transition point, because I think you've kind of sort of foreseen some of the discussion that we want to have with this last tip area. And Tara, I think I'll hand it over to you.
Okay, sorry about that. I'm having a hard time unmuting. So we're going to talk a little bit about values and purpose. Obviously, this is a huge topic. We're only going to sort of scratch the surface, but again, to acknowledge that these very kind of deep things are implicated in just very much sort of the time that we spend online, the time that we spend on screen. Like, are we? Many of us said that we spend 2 hours or more in front of a screen and getting up, and just reflecting a little bit more on, is the way that we're spending our lives really reflective of what our values and purpose are? So kind of reconnecting to those things again. Let me go to the next, please. Okay, last little poll. I think this is the last one. When I'm on digital devices, I rarely lose track of time. Michaela says 4, Regina says 4. You all are awesome. We're looking for tips for you all, from you all for the end. 3, 4. Great. So it sounds like people have already put some of these, put some tips into place, which is great. Which means you can be a resource for each other and for us and for others about this.
Great. Now I want to ask a question for you to share in the chat window. Are you happy with how you spend your time, and especially your time online. And I'll share a personal example here, but I want to just pause for a minute and allow people an opportunity to reflect in the chat window. I had a recent experience. So one of the techniques that I use to hold myself, it's not accountability, it's more like a helpful tool, is I, on my phone, use an application to track how much time I spend on particular apps. And a couple of months ago, the war against Ukraine was launched in February. And I have some friends who have lived in Ukraine, who were in Ukraine. I've visited there a number of different times, and I was just consumed. I was very much consumed by what was happening. So much so that I put Twitter back on my phone, which I had taken off, and then I was sort of following how much time I was spending. And at the end of I think the second or third day of the launch of the conflict, I found I had spent more than 10 hours on Twitter that particular day. Like totally not aligned with how I want to be spending my time, or even really is probably productive. But again, I felt this certain sense of obligation to witness what was happening, to keep abreast of the events. And I just wanted to share that example because I think it sort of explains how this is something we all struggle with. I think it's part of the world that we're living in, and acknowledging that this is something that's not out there for other people to focus on is a really helpful way to also have some of these conversations. Like perhaps if you're a librarian, you're having conversations with a patron who comes in, like how much time you're spending online might be a very neutral way to engage in conversations about what sort of news sites you're engaging with and how those news sites make you feel as well. So we want to talk a little bit about some tools and some tips related to how we manage our time online. And I think the first thing that we want to share is to just manage your time on these applications. And I apologize, I'm having a little bit of trouble seeing my notes here. So one of the analogies that we like, and I saw this came up earlier in the chat, was the idea of relating our information consumption like we think about consuming food, or how food might be healthy as well. And there's a whole body of evidence around how much willpower it takes to say no to each individual cookie that might be in front of you on the counter, and how how it's much easier for you if you can make decisions that sort of remove that temptation from having to make decisions every day, right? So the tools that we're talking about here are really about not trying to say no to every social media post that you might come across, or every news article that you might come across, but about taking a step back and thinking about the patterns of your engagement with information that might make it easier for you to disengage. And so we talk about limiting your time on applications, in particular YouTube. For those who spend a lot of time on YouTube, turning off autopilot or autoplay rather is a really good decision, because YouTube will automatically sort of feed you another video. If you've ever watched kids on YouTube, you've sort of seen how this just like sucks a person in. It's very, very difficult to disengage once that happens. And another thing that you can do is just track how much time you're spending on applications, right? So if you've ever talked to a financial planner, or worked with a personal trainer, for example, one of the first things they'll encourage you to do is to get a sense of how you're spending your money, or how you are, what sort of food you're eating as well. Sort of like understanding what you're taking in or what you're using is a really important piece of data to make decisions. And so on both the iPhone as well as Android operating systems, there are applications that allow you to do this. On iPhone, it's called, I'm not an iPhone user. Tara, jump in, remind me. It's called Screen Time. Thank you. On iPhone, it's called Screen Time. On Android, it's called digital wellness and parental controls. And you can use this to get a really clear picture of not only how much time you're spending, but what applications in particular you're spending time on. That's how I learned that I had spent 10 hours on Twitter. On my phone, you can also track how many times you pick it up, which I think is a scary number to look at sometimes. So that sort of like habitual default to picking up and looking at notification, how many notifications you've received as well. And this is all just useful data, right? Because when you see that data, you may ask yourself, is that what I want to be doing with my life? Is that how I would like to be spending my time? And that's the really important thing that we're focused on here, because that opens up questions about values and about whether or not there's a divergence between how we're spending our time, our energy, our attention, really, and those values that we have. And I also want to just say that I think this is a really neutral way to have these conversations, which is one of the reasons that at IREX we're really interested in this, because we've seen the way that even a concept like media literacy has become political. It's become a political conversation. And so this is a different way to talk about some of these issues. I'm cognizant of time, but I do want to just note that, or I just want to ask this final prompt here. And I want to ask everybody to think of one thing that you can do offline, or not even one thing that you can do, but one thing that you do that gives you a sense of meaning and hope. Oh, we've got some great ones here. Get outside. Kathy said we can go over time. Okay, thanks. Creative hobbies. Yeah, I love these. And as they're coming in, I want to give a little shout out to Representative Jim Murphy and his presentation on the first day of the conference this week. And I think, he kind of made reference to this concept as well. He said that, he feels better when he spends time outside. Here's a photo that I took this weekend where I had spent some time with my daughter and some of her friends, just backpacking in the mountains near us. And what I want to say about this is that this is going to look different for different people, and that's good, and that's okay. Yeah, exactly, Kathy. Thank you. Interacting with actual people in real life. And I think this is a really powerful conversation because it's so universal, and it's something that I think so many of us can relate to as well. So with that, I want to conclude. This is the sort of third tip related to our values and purpose. And if anyone else has anything they'd like to share, please feel free to do so in the chat. And I'm going to hand it over to Tara for a conclusion.
Yeah, so I mentioned a couple of times that we will share a couple of resources, but we're really interested. Clearly, many of you have done some thinking about this and already made some changes. So we're curious about these two questions. What would you like to know? What would be useful to you in terms of planning for and creating more digital wellness for yourself? I think that'll be helpful for us in designing in the future. And then also, what do you find useful? What I mean by that are there resources? Kathy mentioned a book earlier here, Stand Out of Our Light by a former Google engineer, turned philosophy PhD. And then obviously some of the techniques and activities that people mentioned. But again, if there are any resources in terms of, books or websites, experiences, activities, anything that you want to offer, wanted to give that space. to let you do that. And actually, we can go ahead and while you're thinking about that, go ahead and put it in the chat if you think of anything you think that other people would find really useful. You want to move, maybe we can move to the last slide. We have just a few resources we wanted to share that we thought might be useful for you all. So the digital wellness program, which is what this sort of 6-piece Venn diagram from the very beginning was an adapted version of this concept. It came from Emerson Hospital. Something called the Well-Being Project, which makes a really interesting connection between I think they call it well-being and well-doing. So the ability to focus on well-being and what that means for kind of increasing our ability to do good in the world. I love that connection. Something called the Center for Humane Technology, which some of you may know about, which is sort of, I guess, a think tank that has a fabulous podcast and a lot of really great thinking and analysis about these issues. A resource on digital detox. This is one, there are probably many. This author also has some books on digital detox. And then, yes, the podcast is called Your Undivided Attention. And you can just get that on any podcast applications. And then I thought I would offer also our Learn to Discern L2D curriculum, which actually does not have what we have available to the public. Has not had this work integrated yet into it, but we just wanted to let you know that it is free and available for you to use for yourselves and your work however you'd like to. So we wanted to make that available as well. So that's what we've prepared for today. I'm happy if anyone has any kind of final thoughts or questions, reflections, again, resources if you want to share questions that you have about digital wellness. Leave a moment for anyone to either put anything into the chat or unmute if you would like. Perhaps everyone is just ready for,
All
ready
right.
for lunch.
Well, I will take it over here for a second just to say I want to thank Tara and Matt. I also want to let everybody on the event site know that Matt has told me these slides will be coming to us. We will post them on the conference website, so you don't have to be scribbling down URLs right now. We will make those slides available to you on the conference hub. I want to remind everybody that the next session is at 3 p.m. And we will be having a conversation with Sue Ellen Christian, who is, like me, a reporter. She used to work for the Chicago Tribune turned professor. She now teaches at Western Michigan University. Sue Ellen has written a book about news literacy, and she has just launched an exhibit at a museum in Kalamazoo, which is where she teaches. That's really aimed at middle schoolers to teach some of these concepts of news literacy. But I think it's fun enough that even the child in all of us will enjoy this. So it's a good opportunity to look at new ways to teach these concepts in ways that are more kinetic, which is some of the stuff that Tara and Matt have been sharing with us, and outside of the classroom box. So I hope you can join us for that. I do want to remind everybody, registration for this event is open until the close of business on Friday. And so tell your friends, even if they can't attend the event, if they register, which is free, by Friday, they will be able to access videos of all of our sessions for the next 90 days or so. And after that, we will make them available on another platform at the Missouri School of Journalism. So I want to give a huge shout out to our friends from IREX who have been so helpful all along since the very first Friends of the Facts in 2019, and always have great tips. And I also want to thank everybody who is on this call. I think it's really important to understand that these concepts of digital wellness are important because we need the resilience that some of you all referred to in the chat. We need resilience because I will quote Tara, giving up is what Vladimir Putin wants. Giving up is what the enemies of democracy and self-determination want, and we can't give up. So that's why we're here today. That's why we're all here, and I hope you'll come back. So thank you for being a friend of the facts.